AFS Intercultural Programs, as we know it today, is a global leader in international education. Each year, AFS around the world provides immersive cultural exchange experiences to nearly 13,000 high school students and young adults with the help of more than 43,000 dedicated volunteers. For close to 70 years, these intercultural exchanges have fostered peace and cross-cultural understanding in communities around the world. Yet the organization that gave rise to AFS Intercultural Programs, a volunteer World War I and II ambulance and camion corps known as the American Field Service, began when peace and understanding had been left aside. It was wartime in Europe, and the civilian-run American Hospital of Paris had opened a military hospital to treat wounded soldiers from the battlefront. One of the hospital's dedicated ambulance drivers was American A. Pyatt Andrew, a former director of the United States Mint and assistant professor of economics at Harvard University. In 1915, Andrew, now Inspector General of the hospital's Transportation Committee, successfully negotiated with the French Army to send ambulances closer to the front lines of battle. These ambulance units became known as the American Ambulance Field Service. In 1916, A. Pyatt Andrew broke away from the American Ambulance Hospital and created an independent American Ambulance Field Service headquartered in the heart of Paris. As the war progressed, however, a camion service was added to help transport munitions and supplies, and the Corps became known as simply American Field Service. The organization was eventually absorbed into the ranks of the U.S. military after the U.S. entered the war in 1917. In 1920, 3 years after the war ended, the AFS Association was established to coordinate reunions among former members of the American Field Service, as well as to facilitate study abroad fellowships for French and American graduate students. The primary aim of these fellowships was to continue cultivating peaceful ties between the United States and France during the post-war period. When World War II broke out, the American Field Service was reactivated as an ambulance corps under the leadership of Director General Stephen Galati. Galati had taken over the AFS Association after AFS founder A. Pyatt Andrew's death in 1936. The American Field Service served in France until June of 1940, and then allied itself with the British Army in 1941. As the war progressed, its volunteer drivers helped transport wounded from both sides, aiding soldiers from Great Britain, France, Poland, Australia, New Zealand, India, North Africa, Italy, Germany, and Burma. In 1945, as the war came to a close and the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp was liberated by British forces, a contingent of American Field Service ambulance drivers was called in to help evacuate more than 11,000 people from the camp. By the end of World War II, the 2,196 ambulance drivers had carried more than 700,000 wounded combatants from both sides of the war. After World War II ended, the fate of the American Field Service remained in the balance. Its services were no longer needed on the battlefield, but its members were determined to keep alive the spirit of volunteerism that drove the organization through its first 3 decades. In 1946, Stephen Galati and American Field Service drivers from both World Wars assembled in New York City to discuss the organization's future. They pledged to continue the AFS tradition of volunteer service and work to foster friendship among nations. They felt this could best be achieved through intercultural exchanges that helped young people from diverse backgrounds understand one another better. In 1947, the first group of European high school students arrived in the U.S. on scholarships. That following summer, 29 college and high school students embarked on a bus trip across America to see the country and spark U.S. citizens' interest in hosting foreign students and supporting student exchange. By 1950, exchange opportunities for U.S. students were made available thanks to the efforts of AFS exchange returnees who worked to establish programs in their home countries. AFS continued to grow, and by 1964, more than 20,000 students had participated in AFS exchanges. U.S. presidents, who had been meeting with AFS exchange participants since the 1950s, continued to invite the students to the White House and lauded the organization for its contributions to U.S. public diplomacy efforts. Today, AFS is one of the largest volunteer-based organizations of its kind in the world. Beginning in 2014, 100 years after A. Piatt Andrew traveled to France to volunteer as an ambulance driver, we are celebrating the incredible history of the organization and its remarkable transition through the decades. AFS USA is one of the AFS network's largest partners. As it enters its second century, we drive this legacy forward to future generations of AFSers. Through intercultural exchange, an enduring commitment to volunteerism, and exciting new educational initiatives for groups of all ages, AFS USA will continue to inspire people to become the kind of global citizens that the world needs.